Everybody ready? All righty. So, calling this meeting, oh my gosh, of the Bethel Board of Education special meeting, June 3rd, 2022 to order at 2 p.m. All righty. So, something's not muted. Calling this meeting, oh my gosh, of the Bethel Board of Education special meeting.
I did unmute up there.
I just turned the volume in here down.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you,
It'll
Mr. Smith.
still-
Thank you. So I'll just say that again in case there was overplay and replay. Okay? So I'm calling this June 3rd, 2022 special meeting of the Bethel Board of Education to order at 2 p.m. Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Donahue? Here. Mrs. Franz? Here. Mrs. Mansfield?
Here.
Mrs. Sebastian? Here.
Absent. Okay, moving into board business, we have item A, which was to discuss and vote on a resolution allowing board members to participate virtually. This item was put on the agenda prior to receiving the resolution from our board council. The intent was that I was hoping to reach Mr. Elam so that he could participate in our conversation with our K-12 consulting firm about our superintendent search. He is out of town at the moment. I have not been able to connect with him. So that makes this resolution completely null and void and worthless. And actually, by the time we received the wording of it and saw that it is very, I've used the phrase COVID-y, it's very much intended for people who actually have COVID and need to participate remotely. And that would not have been the case anyway. So once I saw the wording and couldn't reach Mr. Elam, put those two things together, and this makes this item completely null and void and not worthwhile. So with permission of the board, the rest of the board members, we can move past that item and move on to item B. Okay?
Do we need to vote to remove it from the agenda since it's on?
We actually can if we wish. Okay, so we'll make a motion to remove it.
Motion to remove that.
Yep.
Did you guys run this by board council?
We did, that's where I ran it by him, that's where it came from, actually, to get the clarification on the resolution itself. That would be the way it goes. It was, the legislature of Ohio had approved this in February, I think, to extend it through July 1st of 2022, House Bill 51. And that was the purpose of it. I was just, like I said, hopeful that we could reach someone who was out of town and still use it under those guidelines, and I couldn't reach Mr. Elam anyway, so it just didn't work out. So, but we can definitely remove it from the agenda if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
Is that a motion, Mrs. Franz, and a second from Mrs. Donahue? Okay, awesome, thank you both. Any discussion further than that? Excellent. So I'm sorry we couldn't reach our fifth party because this is going to be a valuable discussion today, so it's unfortunate. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman? Oh, why can I speak today?
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mrs. Franz?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes to remove that from the agenda with a 4-0 vote. Awesome. Moving on to item B, to discuss the creation of a new position, business manager, and next steps if agreeable. So when we initially discussed the departure of our superintendent and discussed the hiring of K-12 to handle that search for us, I had said that possibly a business manager creation of position might be amenable to the district if that was something we wanted. In executive content, you can see a general description of what a business manager may do. We talked about how a business manager kind of sits over top of, kind of in between a superintendent and a treasurer. So they may be able to handle and move forward our building project. They can pick up, maybe sit over top of like a transportation director. If we have someone who needs guidance and assistance there, they often work with food service and make sure that federal forms and different grants and things like that are handled for us there to help bring additional income into the district. Just multiple responsibilities and things that perhaps we're not taking advantage of as a district right now simply because of staffing. I know in the past we have, volleyed out the possibility of at some point having an assistant superintendent. This might possibly take over that. We have also discussed hiring an EMIS coordinator. So I would foresee that at some point this position would probably replace that position as well. So we're trying to combine multiple concepts into this one position would be my theory. I don't know how the board feels about it. I don't know what everyone else's thoughts are on the idea. But given that we're bringing in potentially an interim or a new superintendent, clearly we need that position filled, and we're going to have some gaps, and we're in the middle of a building project. So we have kind of an immediate need to have someone step in and start taking over some things that need to be moved forward and handled. So thoughts, ideas,
Well, in the first year, the primary duty of this person would be to handle all the building projects.
This person,
The business manager,
Okay,
because
just make
somebody
sure we're on
has
the
to
same
sign
page.
off on stuff, and right now, with Justin's last day being the 31st, that gets a little nebulous. In many districts, the assistant superintendent, or in our past, an owner's representative ran the building project. Usually, your superintendent doesn't do all that, but Justin did and saved the district a lot of money because he did. But it's also a lot of stress, so that's my comments.
do we have a board approved business manager? I know we have a board approved job description for treasurer, for superintendent. Do we have a board approved?
At the time we did those, we did not have one because we didn't have that position in the district. So I've asked Mrs. Hageman to reach out to, was Whittle, is that the name of our job
Yeah.
description company? So
Yes.
she's trying to track down, we still had, I think, was it 4 job descriptions or 5 in the contract that we bought with them?
Yes,
To
but
see-
he sold the company
Yeah.
January 2022. So I've reached out to him. I haven't heard a response, and so, but no, we do not have a board-approved business manager, director of operations job description currently because we didn't have the position, so.
I would imagine whatever job description we get, we would have to work together to clarify those duties. Because again, we're gonna make it fairly non-traditional, especially if we add EMS coordinator into those responsibilities. That would be something that's pretty non-traditional for a business manager to have that as a direct duty.
That was my next question about an EMS coordinator. Do we have a job description? Or
Yes.
We do, right?
we do. Okay.
Yeah, so we foresaw that at the time, right?
Yeah.
So we knew Mrs. Rhodes was gonna be leaving at the time, so. So, you know, we definitely have to tweak whatever we get.
That and this, my understanding is the business manager can be hired by the board.
Yes. Can be a direct hire of the
So-
board. I think we would probably
Would
want
it
to let them know that they'll become a superintendent report at some point because I don't think it makes sense for that person to direct report to us all the time. It's not traditional for them to be a direct report to the board. Obviously, we could. I mean, that's my personal thoughts, but it's not a traditional report to the board position normally. Since so much of what they do falls under the superintendent's duties traditionally. You know, we can go however we want, obviously.
I think the other concern is we are in the middle of a building project. I think there is concern from our leaders in the building project, our external leaders that, you know, there's things we're gonna need answers to in a week or two because of the market right now with materials. If they have things they need swapped out, they need a decision in a quicker timeframe than probably what I would say historically was required. And we're kind of on a deadline because we want that building open in fall of 2023. So, I mean,
I can ask them, since you're here, our K-12 representatives, is there a job description that you'd be able to help us with?
Who is your policy?
We do Neola.
They have job descriptions, and I would think if you only need one,
Mhm.
they should provide that to you
Okay,
maybe.
so that's
at no
something that we
cost.
hadn't thought
That
about.
would be my
Great
first try.
Okay,
If not, we could research some job descriptions for you. But since you already use them for policy, they do have a charge for job descriptions, but you only need one.
okay, that's a thought,
I would hope they would work with you.
absolutely. So if we can't get through the Whittle and can't work that
Yeah,
out
I
since he
can-
sold
I
his
can-
business,
yeah.
we can check with Norm. Okay, awesome.
I do have some concern that maybe a full-blown business manager isn't maybe what we need right now. Possibility of someone reporting to Tina that could work on EMIS and handle other financial work, maybe more in line with what we need right now. And, you know, initially I thought we had discussed finding an EMIS replacement for Gail, not necessarily a business manager. And it is my understanding that it is kind of unusual for a school with less than 2,000 students to have a business manager. We do have a communications director, and I think he was supposed to have taken that off our superintendent's plate, that piece of it, so he could focus more on the construction. We just hired an assistant principal, and if we hire a business manager, we're essentially, you know, hiring him to replace Gail, who handle both EMIS and transportation. So business manager, I think we had talked about that salary being in the range of 90, upwards of 90 grand. We were paying our EMIS and transportation salaries around 64, I think. So we're making a jump there. And I'm concerned about where all the money is coming from, since we still do need to be finishing our 5th grade week. And the question is, why couldn't the assistant treasurer maybe help with some of those duties? And maybe, I don't know if there's anyone else that could handle the EMA students right now.
I know you've reached out for some EMS help. How's that search going? And what are your thoughts about?
Well, EMIS is not as easy as apparently people believe it to be. It is what drives our funding. And so I really think we need somebody with some EMIS background and can help us dig through the data and make sure it's correct and that we're getting paid for every student, every class, everything that we need, because that is dollar-based. Not having your calendar set up correctly could cost you thousands of dollars in funding. The assistant treasurer does payroll, and that is primarily what all she has time to do in a 40-hour work week. So I don't see her doing more than just payroll. And she has no EMIS background other than she knows how to do the staffing side of things, but not submit that to ODE and to clear the errors and see what has, or handle registration or student errors or highly qualified teachers, and all of those wonderful errors that you get in EMIS. Sometimes they ask you crazy things and you have to be able to report on that. And so I just don't think that, I think Gail did a phenomenal job trying to do both transportation and EMIS, and worked way more than a 40-hour work week, and getting that done, and was, in my opinion, grossly underpaid at $65,000 because she was running the transportation department, running EMIS, and even running down here and helping in the kitchen. She did that because she's a Bethel person. She loves Bethel, and that's a good thing. But I don't think that EMIS can be part-time. I think that we have left money on the table, and I think that we need to go back and make sure all that data is correct and not faulting anybody. We all did the best we could, but I just really don't think piecemealing it out like that's going to be a good thing. So.
Well, and the other thing I've spoken about, I believe publicly, was a purchasing manager can negotiate your contracts. That's where the money's saved on the front end. And so if you have somebody who's really skilled, you're going to get the cost savings in your contracts for all the goods that Todd needs and everyone else in the district. But I think Todd's been a big user of material here of late. So to me, it makes sense to put funding there because as we grow, we're going to continue to need that expertise, I guess is what I'm saying. Many districts around us have assistant superintendents that aren't that much bigger than us. Tip City's had an assistant superintendent as long as I know. They're 2,600 kids. So I think with the growth, I personally think it would be a good business move.
I think I said business manager. Did you mean business manager? I think you said assistant. Purchasing manager.
Right, purchasing manager, but whatever the role is, if it's not a traditional assistant superintendent, you need somebody to handle some of that stuff. It's more than what one person can handle.
Yeah, I do agree that a full-time EMS person would be beneficial. Is probably what we need to be looking at.
We can't find.
I do know that Montgomery County ESC, other districts have used them. I haven't gotten any quotes because I haven't had any discussion with the board about whether we want to get quotes from Montgomery County ESC. But I do know that they've contracted with other districts to provide these services. So it may be something we want to take a look at and speak with them about.
Can you speak with?
I spoke to Woka. I can reach out to Montgomery County and see, that's fine.
Yeah, but that was going to be like a 1 year. Didn't know. And
Woka, it offered a 2-year contract at $30,000 a year to provide training, to help us go through the data, make sure it's accurate, and whomever, but they still need a point person in the district to submit all that data. So,
It was $30K to be a helper to someone we would have on staff.
right. So we would still have other duties that have to sort of be, piecemeal out. I think because Gail did everything from what I'm seeing. So stuff that I'm used to seeing maybe a building secretary do or a guidance counselor. It looks like that was all sort of, done by Gail. And so, I mean, I'm amazed at what she got accomplished. But, you know, I'm thinking as we move forward, how do we make that better? Yeah, because we're
Tina,
not gonna find somebody who's gonna work 60 hours a week for $64,000 doing your transportation and your EMIS. You're just not gonna find
Well,
anybody
now we
like
have our
that.
assistant
You know.
principal that's in transportation, is that correct?
Yeah, we do.
Right.
That position, yeah, so it's just getting this, that we're looking for someone.
But it's not just the EMS, because it's someone to take over the building project as well.
Right, I was just
So,
speaking
yeah.
to Enos at this
For
point
sure.
in time, right, for sure.
Absolutely, but our building project is currently ongoing, and it clearly is not something we can just drop and let go. Like, that's something that someone
Right.
has to be able to pick up and take over, for sure. And
An interim superintendent could do that, possibly.
possibly, again, like we said, we've asked Mr. Parks to do that, and that was not something that was within his traditional line of duty either. So he took that on top of his regular position. So it's not something that normally an interim or superintendent would do as being a person agent and building rep. What do we call it? What was it called? Building.
owner's rep.
Owner's
We had
rep.
an
There we
owner's
go.
rep
Thank
with the
you.
previous project.
And then we paid $80,000 to $90,000 for that owner's rep.
That was, and I'm sure now it would be a six-figure salary. At the time, it was
Yeah.
80 or 90,000. I think it's discount did a very good job for the district, but
That's not a position that, like, that's not usually part of a job description for an interim superintendent. So on top of normal purchasing, normal everything else that they would be giving. So we're kind of, I guess, I'm just trying to say, we're sort of in a bind right now with what we're looking at.
So just so I'm clear, because I'm hearing assistant superintendent / business manager or business manager alone, what are
The license that comes from the Ohio Department of Education is for business manager.
okay, so that's what we're.
Yeah.
all right.
But in my mind, if we hired that, we would not then pursue assistant superintendent because so many of the responsibilities that would fall under a superintendent could be picked up by business manager. So it would take that load away.
and hopefully it would help Tina out because I think we've all said Tina has twice as much as what she can get done, and hopefully you get the right person in.
Right. Because the business manager can handle like work comp and insurance and a lot of those things as well. So it would pull some from the treasurer as well as pulling from the superintendent. So it takes some load away from both of those positions while picking up business project and also handling this. So I think it could be a great blend and covering that EMIS salary and covering the building project all at the same time. So financially, it's kind of dollars for donuts, really.
But a business manager, are they gonna know the construction side of it? I think there's gonna be a small subset of people who know EMIS, business management, and construction activities. I think that's gonna be a very small pool if we're trying to combine all that into one.
Yeah. I mean, having not hired for this, I don't know. Let's ask some experts. K-12, you've helped hire and place business managers. What are your thoughts? Is that a candidate you may find?
I think Ms. Donahue brings up a good point.
Sure.
That business managers are going to be well versed in the construction, the operations side, transportation, et cetera. EMIS is a unique,
Sure.
Right.
a unique position, and so they may oversee in a larger district. They may oversee some of that, but EMIS generally rides
Solo
to the
on the
side
side.
of that.
Sure. So it could be tricky.
It could be tricky to find all three of those aspects.
Or it could be tricky to find someone, not so much on the business manager side, but someone who's willing to learn the EMIS side. And EMIS is, like Tina said, your funding comes from all of those things in EMIS. And it's really hard to find qualified EMIS people to even meet that need.
How long would we have to hire, in your experience, a business manager? Would we even be able to hire a business manager for a single year to get us through the construction?
I don't know if we'd call it a business manager. If you're just going to hire them for a year to help get you through the construction, we'd need to do a little research on that. But I was thinking, as I was sitting here, that may be having someone work with your construction and your operations for a year. I know my husband actually did that for Tecumseh. So he went in and worked as the assistant superintendent. So the assistant superintendent could take on the building project because that building project is an animal. you have to be on it daily, or you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have substitutions to your work orders and all of that, which is gonna cost you money in the end. So I was, thinking, is there a way, as you're doing all these transitions, to think about bringing someone in for a year to do that for you? And then you could make the decision, do we want to go with an assistant superintendent or do we want to go with a business manager? And finding someone to do EMIS is another whole issue.
Sure.
So you're
And we don't have
suggesting
any
two positions.
experience with that. Just telling you that way up front.
So you're suggesting two positions though, so I think what we've talked about is maybe a business manager possibly taking on EMIS, but what I hear you saying is now you really need somebody just dedicated to EMIS full time, and then the business manager's taking on the transportation, construction, other, working with our treasurer, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that would give you the most bang for your buck. If you could find a business manager that's willing to be trained in EMIS, then you're great. But I don't know. Be pretty tough.
For a district this size, most of the EMIS, as you mentioned, is done by an administrative assistant position. And so that may be something to keep talking about, is that could you find someone willing to learn that's just focusing on that, or maybe some other auxiliary positions. I would also say when the time comes to watch the title, because an assistant superintendent is going to be a different pool and certification.
Sure.
Business managers could
Absolutely.
easily come from the private sector.
Sure.
And that is going to make hiring an individual in the summer, et cetera, easier. But if they have that assistant superintendent tag, that requires the licensure to follow,
Absolutely.
which is going to be a pool not as accustomed to doing construction projects.
Absolutely. So how would the board feel about trying it, posting it for a couple of weeks and seeing what kind of candidates we get? And then by then, even Mr. Elam's back and we have more of a full board to see where we would go from there if we don't get candidates who are willing to be a business manager and take on EMIS. Is that worth what, giving it a shot?
So include everything in
Yeah.
that bucket just to see.
Give it a try.
Well, I would put first and foremost, we're looking for business manager,
Correct.
because we still need that, and then put attractive, or however you want to word it, considering in the future, after construction's done, we're an EMIS or something like that, so it's clear in the job description that that's not a requirement, because I don't want to eliminate everybody from the pool off
I
the
mean,
bat.
what are your thoughts? And then with the understanding that if we don't get someone with EMIS, we might potentially continue the search further, might have another discussion.
I mean, I don't really know. I think I'd have to think on this a little bit because I hear Dusty saying administrative assistant would oftentimes take on a role helping the treasurer with things like EMIS. Did I get that correct? So, and again, with that, in the business manager handling transportation and construction, we have someone, I thought, that was handling the transportation, so that kind of takes that
We
off.
do, and I'm
Okay.
not concerned about transportation, that's not
Okay.
what I'm talking about.
So, and then construction, I think is the main,
Correct.
that's kind of the, so again, I'd almost rather see what interim candidates that we get. We feel like they might be able to take that on.
Could be.
Because if you're talking about a business manager, you're talking about somebody that needs a license, you're not getting anybody for 90, 95 and upwards. I mean, the salary is understandably going to be.
So how about this then? How about we table this conversation until we hear from K-12 about our interim candidates? And within the same meeting, when we hear that, before we would go to executive session to talk about any specific you may have, we can come back and readdress the business manager potential conversation. Maybe we do have a conversation again about whether we float
Sure.
an application. Does that sound okay?
I was just going to say it might be helpful. I had a district of 2,500 students when I was superintendent, and we had a dedicated person for EMIS. It was just critical to our funding to have
Yeah.
that dedicated person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That makes sense. That's very important.
And I agree. I just wanted to make sure it was clear as well. We're gonna move down these paths parallel at the same pace for the interim superintendent, I'm sorry, and the potential business
Well,
manager.
not know the status at the moment, I would say theoretically, but we have to get the status first before I know
Yeah,
the answer to that.
I was just
But,
looking, for that priority, because I wasn't sure, it sounded
Yeah, I
like it
mean,
was
we have to have a
shifting.
superintendent by August 1st. Legally, we have to. So that has to take priority over everything else. But
Okay,
that would have been my goal, yeah. So, but can we just table item B? I think,
we'll come back to it.
yeah, is everybody okay with that for a second? Okay. In that case, then, that's just table for a second and we'll
We need
move.
to do a motion for tabling it.
It's just a discussion.
It's just a discussion, not a vote, right? Okay, so moving to discussion C. Briefly, district administrators I know are here. Thank you all for attending and coming. Just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to let the board know of any upcoming calendar items for June and July, things that we need to be aware of as a board that are on your calendar that are coming up, that any new coming interims and or superintendents that need to be aware of, so that things don't just fall off the plate, or anything that the board needs to be concerned about, so that we know a new interim coming in, hey, this is gonna be something you have to look at day one. So if there's anything you need to let us know about that, if you want anything else you want to share, this is a great time for that conversation. But mainly, I wanted you to be here and hear our update on the search. But if there's anything you have to share, this is a great time for that. Just want to give you the opportunity. Anyone? Our principals are here.
I'd say, just to be clear, for example, there's a high school English teacher position posted.
Okay.
Once we go through the interview process with that, normally I would submit to the superintendent to then submit to the board for approval. Is that
Correct.
still supposed to go through Justin?
Yes, that'll still be the same thing. He's still our superintendent of record through July 31st. It would still go through him, and then he will send a memo to us, and it'll get placed on the agenda, because he is still legally the sole person who can approve hires that way to the board. Like, he's the only person who can recommend a hire to us. So it still has to follow that same chain. Yeah, so any of you who are hiring, I know elementary, I think, has some positions. So anything like that that's coming through, you still have to follow the same normal process you normally would. It'll still get, hey, the committee met, interviews were held, whatever, we've hired this person, still send that to Justin, and then he'll still send it either to Della or however that works in central office to get it on the agenda. And then he's creating memos that summarize his superintendent items for discussion and voting items. He's creating those and sending those to me if I'm going to be available, or Mrs. Sebastian if I'm not, that she can then read his items and summarize. And then in meetings, you know how it goes. If we say, can you explain this candidate's background and talk to us about it, whatever, just like normal in meetings for that part. That way it legally has gone through the proper channels. So,
Secondly, the purchase order requisition process, is he still signing off in addition to those things so that we can have the materials and supplies?
that
we
is
need
my
at the time
understanding.
school
Yeah,
starts?
absolutely. And I think he can do that all electronically from wherever he is at that time. Yep, and I think he can still do the safe account sign-offs from wherever he is too. So any of that stuff that needs to be done, that's not already done, can still be done virtually as well. Yep, great questions, Mr. Swope. Thank you.
And I just want to ask, apologize for interrupting. June 17th is officially this last day of business, correct?
That's
That
in the
he would
office,
be
yeah.
in the office conducting business, right? Because the other time is time off that has been
Vacation time, sure.
vacation time, right? So, yeah, so, I mean, potentially he could do something after June 17th, but
Yeah, he's still our superintendent of record all the way through the 31st of June. He is legally our superintendent of the district. July 31st. Thursday, June 31st, right? I'm making up calendar dates. Yeah, so July 31st, he is our superintendent of record. Mr. Firks is still our superintendent all the way through July 31st. But he is on vacation and will not be in the office. So anything we're doing, we're talking about electronic things, and he could still do by logging into systems, or he can sign things electronically, so on and so forth. So there'll still be some operational things he'll be doing from wherever he may be, but he is still our superintendent of record and legally required to do some things like that.
okay.
And he's aware of that. We've had those conversations, so.
Okay.
Yeah. I just, for clarification, was like, okay, so how does this work for the July meeting? And
And that's
Yeah,
why I'm
so-
asking,
yeah,
because
for
that gray period there is a little fuzzy, and I want to make sure that, I apologize, you probably
No,
all
you're-
knew that,
you're
I
good.
didn't.
You're
so.
totally good. You're totally good. I just clarified because I know, like, from the July meeting, I was like, okay, so how is that going to work for, so I already asked him that question on our behalf. So, yep, absolutely. I make sure too. We're all in the same boat there. Yeah.
We did have one question for Mrs. Shaw.
Sorry, I was taking a call from an interim, so I didn't want to miss that
No,
call.
absolutely not.
Mrs. Shock, I'm sorry. We had our work session agenda meeting, and on that, for the board meeting, is the gifted intervention plan to be approved by the board. Natalie and I wanted to make sure, will you be submitting that, or does Mr. Ferks need to submit that?
I gave it to Mr. Ferks and Della, and they were planning to put it on.
But once it's approved, do you submit that, or, because we just want to make sure once it's approved, it gets submitted, because Tina had that question, I said, I don't know, we will ask Mrs. Shock tomorrow, so that's what I'm doing. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, we just weren't sure, how that
It was
process
submitted
works.
to the state.
I believe, is that correct, Tina?
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry, I said, yeah, I'm in my living room, yes. Who would have to submit that to the state afterwards? I just want to make sure, or if it even requires that I don't know, it's outside my.
It's required to be submitted to.
You just have to have it approved.
Or I believe, but
And
we'll.
We'll double check. Yeah.
Appreciate you handling that, Mrs. Shaw.
Anything from our other administrators, other questions, concerns? Thank you so much for letting us know those things that you're concerned about, and we'll stay on top of it as much as we possibly can. And if anything comes up, feel free to, let us know, and we'll pass anything along to other board members and whatever. I'm a great point of contact. So I'll be, when I'm unavailable, Mrs. Sebastian, being vice president, is a great person to drop that to, and we'll share everything we hear with the other board members as needed. Okay? Thank you all so much. I appreciate you very much. Okay, next discussion item, if there's nothing further from the board on that one, is K-12, discuss search progress and options with K-12 consulting. So we have Deb Campbell and Dusty, I forget your last name. Dusty Miller, thank you. I know Dusty's so easy, it's rolled off the
It's
tongue,
kind of
so.
like a plant.
Thank you.
Plant.
So much.
Plant. The Dusty
So
Miller.
we're looking forward to this very much. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Well, thank you so much for allowing us to come and talk with you today. You are in a difficult position, as many school districts around the state. We just finished a superintendent search on Wednesday night. When did you finish?
One a week ago.
A week ago. I had a call this morning for another search that they were going to try to finish before July 10th, which would be even more problematic. And they did not want to look at an interim, and they're probably going to end up having to do that. But we appreciate the fact to be here. We're sorry that we're back so soon because we know it's a lot of stress, not only on a board, but on staff. It's a stress on your leadership team, your staff, everybody wondering who that next person will be. So Dusty and I felt like the best way to maybe talk about it, I know Lori and Natalie know very much about the search and they're very familiar with it. But I just brought you a handout and we're going to go through a few of the points on the handout. And that is that our job is to make your job easy because it is a stressful time. So we will do interview notebooks for you. We will collect all the applications for you. And we believe that you should see every applicant that applies for your position. So you will look at those in a secure portal. Then we will come and do a candidate screening and talk to you about the applicants. So our job is to make your job easy and fun. So we are suggesting, of course, that you put an interim in for the year and then do a full-fledged search. And that would include community participation at the beginning of the search and community participation at the end of the search. So Dusty and I would want to come to the board in September and organize your search. We would want to talk about who's going to be the lead. We're going to talk about what kind of focus groups you would like for us to do. Just getting everything down. We're going to secure the dates for interviews. That's the hardest, making sure that everybody's available for the interviews. So we would do that in September. And then we would also post your position in September. Now, we used to post on OECN, That system is no longer, it's defunct. So the only place we post is BASA, unless the board wants to pay $250 to have it posted on the Ohio School Boards. It's our belief that BASA is where everybody looks for jobs, and it's a free posting for you. So, but that's a board decision. If you would like to post with OSBA, Tina would be able to do that for you. Okay? So we begin recruiting immediately. That's something that's a little different about our company. We look around and we look at that profile that we're going to develop and say, this would be a great person for here. This would be a great person for here. And there are people that are pretty happy in their jobs and they don't want to move. So it's our job to convince them of why they should move, okay? We've been pretty successful at that, so we're hopeful that that won't be a roadblock coming forward. So we'll actively recruit, and we'll do that throughout the state of Ohio. In early October, we would propose that we do profile meetings. And those profile meetings would consist of doing, and this is old material. I did not create new material for you, but this is what it would look like. We would create an online presence so that teachers, administrators, and community could give input to this process. And then we would also hold a full day of focus groups. So our focus groups would be with the staff, and we do that at a time convenient for them. So we try to do like the elementary staff right after they dismiss. You know, we try to do the middle school, high school. I believe we did those together last year, middle school, high school, because it was the same time. And then we do an evening community. And you guys had a lot of people at your community giving input last time. So I think that's really successful to do a community. We also do a session with students. We gave Mr. Swope some guidelines as to how to select the students. He did a fabulous job. And then we get input from the students as to how they would answer those questions on that questionnaire. So that is how we gather all of this information. And this information is critical to us as recruiters. It's also critical to your community and your staff that somebody's listening to what they want that next superintendent to look like. Okay? At the end of these focus group meetings, see, this is my banner today.
I'm trying to do it well.
At the end of those focus group meetings, we'll develop a superintendent search profile. And so we would bring that to the board in late October. And that would also be a compilation of our focus groups and also the online surveys and the surveys we collect during those focus groups. Okay? You'll see that each of the questions will be divided by what were the consistent themes that we heard across each group, and then what did the board say? What did our administrators say? What did the students say? And so what did the support staff say? So we will go through and then delineate all that information for you. Questions?
One thing to add about the profile is that our candidates look at that document. If people are interested in becoming superintendents, they know profiles exist and they read those closely. You'll see it before it's released, but that captures, as Deb said, what your community wants, what you want, what your administrator wants, and it's our job to make sure, not our candidate, it's your candidates, that this is a good fit for not only you, your community, but the superintendent themselves. So that profile is their roadmap.
And it's critically important to have that step for us in the process. No matter what level search you choose to do, we always do a profile. So anybody who's familiar with K-12 will look for that profile because they know it's going to be there. So then we would propose, after we're still working in the background, we're continuing to recruit. And then we would have posting go through December. And then around January, you would receive an email with a link to a secure portal. And then you would go into that secure portal and you would have the entire application packet of every applicant. So all their transcripts would be there, their application would be there, their resumes, their cover letters, all that you'll have access to. And then we would come back after you've had access to that for 3 or 4 days, and we would actually sit down and have a meeting with you and say, what questions do you have about these candidates? How can we answer them? We are not the FBI, but we're really good at vetting our candidates. We have enough connections throughout the state that we can call the Buckeye Association of School Administrators. That's where superintendents who get themselves in trouble call. We have a great relationship with the High School Principals Association and the Elementary Principals Association, and we can confidentially talk to those people about candidates that we might see something that we're just not real sure about. And so we can, like I said, we're not the FBI, but we try to do our research and make sure that whoever you're hiring is never going to have some skeleton in the background that would embarrass you or your community, your administrators, whoever. So when we come for that candidate screening, we would be sharing those kind of things. And you would be asking us questions about the candidates. And I know Lori knows that, we usually, because we are friendly with our candidates and we get to know them, we know probably more about candidates than any other search firm. I know that the candidate that just got the job at Van Buren, before he ever got the job, I knew he had a daughter. I knew where his wife was going to work. I knew where his parents lived. I knew all of that simply because we build relationships with the people we're going to be recruiting.
And that helps us then, because we know what you're looking for as a community, and we can make those matches much easier.
Okay. So then around mid-January, we would do first round interviews. A board usually, and I will tell you, we are either getting tons of candidates or no candidates, hardly any candidates. How many did you have it?
We had about 25.
They had 25. That's great. I just did Van Buren, an excellent school district. They had 12. So there's lots of things that play into what your candidate pool is going to look like. But it's either, if you don't care whether they have experience, you might get 25. If you want a superintendent with experience, Kettering City Schools just hired their superintendent. They had 12 applicants. Huber Heights just hired their superintendents. We did that search. They had 13 applicants. So what I'm saying is, it depends on what you're looking for too, and what you put out as your criteria to hire that person.
It wasn't that long ago, those numbers were much higher. So the pool hasn't shrunk, but people are not willing to jump into these roles like they were.
Right.
Even 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. So then by the end of January, we would do final interviews. And at that final interviews, you normally bring back 2 or 3 candidates. For first round interviews, you normally interview 6 to 8 candidates over 2 nights. For final interviews, you bring back 2 or 3. And at that point, you're going to have participation again from your staff and from your community. So it's really critically important that they meet those people and they give the board feedback. So the community will, and the staff will meet them. They will fill out a feedback form, and we will make sure that you have that before you make your final decision. Okay? Early February, we feel like you should be ready to employ your next superintendent. And then that gives time for transition. It gives time for that person to start meeting the board, meeting the staff, meeting the community. And because you have an interim, we would say we're not sure when the start date would be. Could be sooner than August 1, but at least by August 1. Okay?
If the interim is interested in the position as well, it gives you time to get to know them, you know, versus if we try to do the search earlier in the fall, there may not be enough time.
So that is a basic process for you to think about. Now, we know you need an interim, so we've been doing some work on that. We can talk to you in executive session about that. But what questions do you have or anybody in the audience have about the search? A lot of these folks have been through it before, been through the process before.
Do you have, how many interim candidates do you have? Or can you not share that with us?
We cannot share that with you. In fact, I just took a call from one. So, you know, some candidates are not willing. Yeah, some candidates aren't willing to put their name out there if the board's not willing to look at them. So those are private conversations with K-12 and the board. Okay?
More questions? I've been on that
Yep.
side of it
Right.
before, so
Yeah. So you know.
I'm a little more familiar, perhaps.
Right. I didn't think you were on the board, but I'm like, she's really familiar. I know her from somewhere. So it was on the other
The
side.
community focused groups and
Yes,
the
yes.
process.
And I think that process is so important for a community. To have say at the beginning of the process, this is who we're looking for, and then to say at the end of the process, this candidate really resonated with me. I really thought this candidate was what we were looking for. And that's just a personal evaluation.
So in total, it would be, the posting would be online for about, I was trying to go back here,
That's
September to
It'd
December.
probably be the end of September till you got it up online, or mid-September, so about 3.5 months. That's a typical posting. That's a very typical posting for us. Now, like this time of year, Van Buren could only do a 3.5 week posting because they were just up against that July 10th timeline when people don't have to let them out of their contract. But if you really want to do a good search, you need at least 3 months of posting.
have you ever run into a case where, I don't know, maybe after the first 2 months, nothing else trickles in, or have you ever closed one early?
No,
Okay.
and I'll tell you why. Almost all applicants come in the last week. Or even the last day. So, you know, K-12 will give you weekly updates where we are. And the Van Buren board was getting really nervous because a week before we had 3 candidates. And then we had, 21. People wait. People are happy where they are. And we're pushing to get them to apply. So we have never closed a search early. I haven't, never. Yes.
So if you're pushing people that are already in another position to apply,
Mhm.
and we get the absolute greatest person that could ever be a superintendent, and then somebody else is looking for a superintendent, do you guys then come back and push our superintendent?
That's an excellent question.
That is a perfect question. We give the board 2 guarantees. Our company gives the board 2 guarantees. The first guarantee is that if this doesn't work out in the first year, we will come back and do a search for minimal cost. Because we feel like that's on us. We should have made the right match.
Fair.
We should have brought you the candidates that were right for you. So you know how hard we work, because we've never had to come back and do a search in the first year. The second guarantee we give the board is if we placed this person with your district, we will not touch them for 5 years. We will not recruit them for 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean they might not look somewhere else,
Right.
We just
but
do it
it's
on
not
our
going to be us.
Okay.
Great
And
question.
It was a great
And
question.
one of the unique things about K-12 is all of us that are working in the consulting, like we all do this because we have either been in K-12 for a long time or love it, like, or we're doing other things, but it's like, this is our like passion to make sure that school districts find the right people to be in those seats. So we take that very seriously, that if we place the right person, we're not going to poach them, and so you have to start it.
Yeah, I didn't want to use the word poach. But
That's okay, we use those
Yeah.
words, that's what it is.
It's a competitive, unlike any other position in K-12, the superintendency is a position that you do need to have people that are polling and have some parameters, so you're not mistreating districts.
Yeah, and our company has been around since 2001 doing superintendent searches, and our motto is we do no harm. We are not going to harm this board, and we're not going to harm the board that we're taking that superintendent from. So, when I took a superintendent from another district, K-12 offered to help them put together some materials to start a search. Not that we were going to do it. Let's just help you think about how to start your search. Because some districts don't want to hire a firm, they want to do it themselves. So we're all about doing no harm. And if we took your superintendent after 5 years, that'd be doing you harm. So we would not do that. That was an excellent question.
I guess the only question I have, I'm familiar with the silver package, I've seen it work, so differences between going up to gold, stepping down, I
Yeah.
assume that's community.
Stepping
related.
down, there's no community participation in the end of the search. Stepping up, you did a gold search last time, I believe. No, you did a silver. You did a silver. With COVID, we really got away from gold searches because a gold search requires 2 finalists to spend the day in the district. So it is a full day that they're here meeting with students and staff and business leaders and all that. And then they are interviewing with the board, they are doing a community session, and they are going to dinner with the board. It's a great process.
But silver is by far the most popular.
Yeah, and I think it's very adequate because it has good community participation in the front and at the end of the search. Quiet.
Friday afternoon.
That's not that. Further? 2012 before we questions? Okay, so it sounds like our tabled conversation needs to take place after we discuss interim candidates. We may need to actually have, first time ever, conversation after executive, which we hardly ever do. Take action after executive, but it may happen this time. Everyone agree with that?
I'm sorry, take action.
Well, because we were gonna come back to the discussion about business manager
Right.
and make a decision about that. We can't really do that until we discuss interim, but we need to discuss interim in executive session. So it's very unusual for us to come out of executive session and reapproach the conversation, but we have to hear about interims, which is unrelated to that, but connected nevertheless. We can't really have a further discussion about business manager until we hear about our interim candidates. So I think we're gonna have to, is that what everyone understands, same as I do?
It sounds like it. I was thinking both of these were parallel paths, but it may be that we do need to hear what we need to first before we can make it. Or, I don't know if we're necessarily we're just discussing actually the business manager portion of it afterwards then.
Yeah,
Bring it back
it's not
to-
slated for a vote.
Yeah.
It's definitely not slated for a vote. Thoughts? I mean, I'd just like to know what to tell everyone before we would go to executive.
Well, it says next steps of that. So I don't want to say yes or no because I don't know what conversation's
Agreed.
gonna.
Agreed.
So I think we will re-bring up item B after we've talked to K-12. That's probably the safest thing to
I
say.
think that makes sense. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so moving then to item 3, executive session. We have a need for executive session, item 1, to have a conversation with K-12 regarding the search for interim, specifically the employment compensation of employee. Is there a motion to move to executive session? I'll move. Thank you, Mrs. Sebastian. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. When you're ready, Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mrs. Franz?
Yes.
Passes 4-0 into executive session at 2:55 PM. Possible conversation at the conclusion of executive session. So that's what I'm going to say. Thank you all so much for your attendance, and we'll let you know when we're out.
Nice to see you. Thank